Tyler Cloud. I'm in my second year of the Graduate Landscape Architecture program. And to start, I would like to thank the Knowlton School for this amazing opportunity, as well as the Columbus Foundation, and also Christy Sheremy for her helpful advice. Growing up in a religious community certainly left its mark on me in more ways than one. I grew up seeing the value in spaces that try to transcend what is known, and these spaces of connection, how these spaces of connection can serve as the foundation of an entire way of life. I also learned that when your voice has been marginalized, you become more sensitive to those voices that too have been discounted. And the people that I'm going to be talking about today have been marginalized to the point of exhaustion. I am moved by the stories embedded in their landscapes, and this trip has left me with more questions than answers, however. My original goal was to investigate the sacred sites of the Plains cultures, record their narratives, and document their location. And on the first day, I was told that I was strongly encouraged not to record the locations of these sites, and also that I would not be able to show any artifacts that we actually found, which made my task a little bit more challenging. But this is understandable because many of these sites suffer from regular ARPA violations, and those are violations against the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. And these serious infractions occur when looters dig up sites without a permit to find artifacts to keep or sell. I would also like to thank Linnell Peterson on the left. She is the owner of Ethnoscience, the archaeology firm that I worked with this summer, and also Brenda Maloney, who was the field manager that I worked with primarily during my visit. It's also important to note that in all instances observed, Ethnoscience went above and beyond what is considered standard practice in the investigation and documentation of these sites. I thought it would be best to immerse myself in the area's histories and stories to help put the sites that I would be working on into context. This sacred site is officially called Devil's Tower, and is an igneous monolith that rises more than 5,000 feet above the horizon line. Because it can be seen for many miles as one moves through the plains, it reads as an unchanging force and establishes an omnipresence that understandably impacted movements and beliefs of those near throughout its history. Many Native Americans, however, call this place Bear Lodge or similar. And in 2005 and 2014, proposals were submitted to officially rename the site Bear Lodge, stating that the sacred site's current name is offensive. Both times, officials of the state opposed the change. This visit made me wonder who should have control and make decisions for these preserved sites, and how much, if at all, heritage is being considered. This next site is called Inyankara, which translates to the rock gatherer, and is sacred for many, particularly expectant mothers and mothers in childbirth. Private land, however, surrounds the site, and access is only granted through the Federal Park Service if the landowner gives permission. Is it right that significant sites like these can have their access restricted to those who have been using them since time immemorial? In the next slide, those are rock herons there in white. And they generally memorialize people, landmarks, or events. It's not uncommon to find human or animal remains under stone stacks like these. Farmers, though, often deposit field stones on these stacks or remove them completely. Lines and clusters of these cairns stop the hillsides of the region that I worked in, which is around Lake Sakakawea in North Dakota. How does one evaluate the significance of these clusters on a small parcel when they could easily be part of a larger, expansive system? Vor Buffalo Jump was rediscovered when a highway was being built in the area. The feature is a sinkhole that early Plains people used before the arrival of horses to drive smaller herds of buffalo over the edge of the cliff. Archaeologists estimate that many tribes used this site. Recently, a guideline of rock cairns that spoke out from this land feature to a possible second cliff site was rediscovered. A farmer has removed a portion of this line of cairns for 3/4 of a mile for a cornfield, unfortunately. but the cairns are still intact a quarter of a mile after that, and the correlation between the two sites is unmistakable. This is a large system that has already been damaged by agriculture. Currently, if any type of historical site in North Dakota exists on private land, its care and destruction is completely left up to the landowner. Whose interests does this format privilege? The patch of land this site was on, this is called Turtle Petriform. It is kind of a crazy turtle. It was thankfully donated to the Historic Preservation Society of North Dakota. It sits on top of a hill in the middle of an Angus grazing pasture. Access is also owner dependent, and it made me think how respectful is having this site, a site that is still visited, be spotted in cow manure in an active livestock field. This 75-foot diameter stone circle gathering space is Bighorn Medicine Wheel and was constructed by the Plains Indians between 300 and 800 years ago, but operates part of a larger complex system of other documented archaeological sites that demonstrate the adaptive ability of early Plains tribes. This complex of sites shows landscape manipulation over an estimated 7,000 years. This site and its system is actively being preserved, thankfully. The Park Service respectfully shuts down general public access during periods of ritual usage. And before I talk about the sites that I worked on, it's important to understand the context of the land of the sites where I worked. Lewis and Clark's expedition traveled through the area that I worked on in the summer of April of 1805. This area in North Dakota is now known as Lake Sakakawea and was noted to be inhabited and to have notable cultural resources. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, white settlers were common in the area, and many believed during this time their agricultural practices destroyed many of these sacred sites. Fort Berthold Reservation was created in 1870 on the Missouri River by what is now Lake Sakakawea, and that is the Fort Berthold Reservation, and the blue is the Missouri River. As part of the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, the Fort Berthold Reservation housed what is called the three affiliated tribes, and they are the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. The Pick Sloan Missouri River Basin Program proposed installing a dam in Garrison, North Dakota on the Missouri River, one of 6 main stem dams as part of a flood control infrastructure project. This is a picture of George Gillette on the left, chairman of the Fort Berthold Tribal Indian Council, weeping as Secretary of Interior J.A. Krug signs a contract whereby the tribe, threatened with confiscation of the land in question, sells 155,000 acres of its reservation. Gillette is quoted saying, "We will sign this contract with heavy heart. With a few scratches of the pen, we will sell the best part of our reservation. Right now, the future doesn't look too good to us." This is a photo of the waters rising. More than 1,700 residents, which accounted for 80% of the tribal membership at the time, were forced to relocate from an area these tribes called their home for perhaps a millennium, prompting the loss of an entire way of life. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completed the Garrison Dam. The reservoir flooded 1/4 of the reservation, destroying the tribal headquarters, the reservation hospital, 94% of the arable land. This decimated much of the 3 affiliated tribes' economy. Many undocumented prehistoric and historic sites were covered by the rising water. This is still an emotional subject for many in this area. So this is the first site that I worked on. It is actually in the area. You can see here the grid has already been set up for excavation, and there was one large rock circle about 33 foot across and 2 smaller circles approximately 15 feet across. Testing was done and Knife River flint flakes were found in the largest circle. The site itself is at least 600 years old, but likely much older. Results for the dating are not yet available. Early Plains people would gather nearby rocks and place them on the edge of their teepees or lodges to weigh down the skin ends. The abnormal size of the large circle we were excavating indicates that it's likely not a ring left by a teepee, but perhaps a gathering space or the footprint of a lodge. This is my first artifact, super excited. It's a shard of Knife River flint, and these flakes were created by the oblique striking of a flint core from nearby Knife River to shape bifaces for scraping or points to top arrows or spears. And numerous flakes were found in the circle that we were excavating. This is the finished site. Native Americans have used stone circles for many things, from rites of passage to sacred gathering areas. It's likely early humans constructed this particular circle. And if that is the case, is this site therefore less capable of being held in high regard or sacred to those who have lived on the plains with these rock circles for the last several hundred years or longer? Would these tribes therefore have a claim to these circles? This site is on privately owned land, and the owner has sold it to a petroleum company. The company hired ethnoscience to evaluate its eligibility for the National Historic Registry. Not enough historically significant artifacts were found to meet the criteria set for preservation, so the site will be demolished for mining. What is historical enough to save, and is our current idea on the subject adequate? This is the fourth site that I worked on. Some Knife River flint flakes were found at the site also, as well as one other that I'm not showing. The repeated act of tilling a field during this area's occupation, however, disturbed the site so much and made locating any clusters of artifacts nearly impossible and prevented the ability to discern if the site was historically significant. The same was true for the other. At this site and many of the other sites around Lake Sakakawea, still waiting to be evaluated, intense progressive erosion is occurring from the higher water levels, and tighter sites are falling off the cliffs into the water. So in conclusion, how does one address the pervasive issue of willful blindness towards these incredible cultural resources by the public, agricultural community, and state and federal government? What tools does landscape architecture possess that can help bridge this void among surveying, identification, evaluation, and preservation? There's an immediate need to address the rapid loss of this cultural resource now. Thank you.